The Meridian Gate floated in silence at the edge of a glowing nebula, surrounded by stars that shimmered like distant lanterns. It was the most peaceful place in the galaxy, where great wars had ended, where peace treaties were signed, and where the Galactic Council held its most important meetings. On this day, Earth was finally going to be accepted into the Council. After years of working hard, trading fairly, offering help to wounded worlds, and sharing technology without asking for much in return, humanity had earned its chance. Ambassador Riva Nolan stood proudly at the center of the council chamber, her formal black and blue uniform sharp against the soft gold light of the hall. She was calm, quiet, and alert. Above her, seated in crescent-shaped rows that reached high like a grand theater, were the representatives of over 70 alien species, each different, each proud, and each watching. Some had 4 eyes, others had wings, some floated in small tanks, and a few looked almost human. Riva had seen them all before, debated with them, worked with them. She had believed they respected Earth. She believed they had accepted her people as equals. But as she stepped forward, something strange began to happen. The comlink to Earth's mission control, always active in her ear, went dead. No static, no warning, just silence. At the same time, the display screens on the walls flickered and turned off. From the corner of her eye, she saw the guards at the chamber's edge move forward, not casually, not with ceremony, but with purpose. Their arms moved to their belts, where energy binders rested. Their steps were slow, rehearsed. They began to surround the Earth delegation, 5 diplomats, 2 aides, and 1 historian. Riva didn't move. She simply looked up at the council speaker, who stood beneath the council's crest, a swirling silver circle with lines that represented unity among species. The speaker was a tall figure from the Kalari race, known for their calm voices and diplomatic tone. But today, there was no warmth in his voice. His words echoed across the chamber, sharp and cold. By emergency vote of the Council, Earth stands accused of violating Galactic Regulation 7-31. There was a moment of stillness, an unnatural pause that settled like fog. Riva blinked once. She knew the entire Council code. She had studied it for years, memorized every regulation. But there was no Regulation 7-31. It had never existed. She looked around, waiting for someone to object. The Kravari? The Eliari? Even the quiet Solari, who had worked with Earth on medical projects. But no one spoke. No one even looked surprised. That's when she knew it wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a sudden misunderstanding. It was planned. A guard stepped closer now, raising energy fields around the Earth team. One of the aides raised her hand in confusion, but the guards didn't pause. Riva could hear her team whispering questions, unsure, frightened. But she remained steady. She raised her hand slowly, as if brushing a speck of dust from her collar, but her fingers touched a ring on her left hand. It was silver, simple, and old something passed to her when she first became ambassador. Inside it was a hidden transmitter, coded to send only one message to one receiver. She leaned slightly, tilted her head to block the nearest guards. View, and whispered just 3 words. Execute Protocol Ember. The moment passed quietly. No alarms went off. No lights changed. But across the far edges of the galaxy, deep beyond the range of Council sensors, Earth's hidden watchers came alive. In the dark between stars, a fleet began to move. These weren't the ships seen in trade convoys or science missions. These were unmarked, silent, and built from years of studying alien designs. Hidden in asteroid fields, floating beneath the shadows of gas giants, resting in old ruins long believed abandoned, dozens of Earth's deep space vessels received the signal and responded at once. Protocol Ember had been activated. It was not a war plan. It was something older, something quiet, something Earth had never intended to use, unless pushed beyond diplomacy. Riva was taken without resistance. The other humans, though confused, followed her lead and remained calm. She was led down a quiet hallway beneath the chamber, into a white room with curved walls and bright lights. There were no windows. Number. Monitors. Just a metal seat in the center. The door closed behind her. Still, she was not afraid. She had expected something like this. Not this exact shape, but something similar. Earth had risen too fast, learned too much, adapted too easily. Other species took centuries to reach the Council. Earth had done it in under 70 years. That speed had not been welcomed. It had been tolerated, and only for a while. Now it was clear. The Council didn't want Earth at the table. They wanted them out, but not with war. War brought attention, consequences, and questions. No, they wanted Earth removed quietly, through a web of false laws, secret votes, and political shadows. Riva's arrest was just the beginning. Across the stars, Earth's embassies were likely being shut down, their scientists expelled, their communication links severed. But Earth had been ready. While it had offered open hands, it had also kept quiet eyes in the dark. The dauntless Horizon, the largest ship never spoken of, drifted beyond the edge of Lyrae sector, waiting in cold silence. It had no registration code, no official home port, and no voice. But now it moved. Dozens of other ships joined it, each following coded paths. Each ready to act not with violence, but with precision. Riva sat in the metal chair, hands folded. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the stars beyond. She knew that in a few days, maybe sooner, everything would change. Earth would not strike back with weapons. It would not destroy cities or fleets. No, that was not their way. Earth would answer as it had prepared, by turning off the galaxy's lights, one switch at a time. In the days that followed the ambassador's quiet arrest, the galaxy remained strangely calm, too calm. The Council released no further public statements, only a short message that Earth's membership had been delayed for review due to procedural concerns. It sounded harmless, even routine, but behind the scenes, messages were being deleted. Diplomatic links shut off, and Earth's presence across hundreds of stations was being erased. Human scientists working on shared projects were quietly escorted off ships. Research bases were locked. Earth's embassies in the central systems were closed for maintenance, and their staff never returned. Trade routes that once welcomed Earth cargo now placed them in endless inspection delays, holding their goods until spoilage made them worthless. From the outside, it all looked like slow bureaucracy, but it wasn't. It was a silent blockade, carefully shaped so no. One would call it an attack. Most Council citizens didn't notice, and those who did simply assumed Earth was in some kind of trouble. But Earth noticed everything. The dauntless Horizon, Earth's most secret ship, now drifted just outside the edge of Council detection range. Its matte black hull absorbed light, its engines moved without heat, and its scanners listened to every signal bouncing across the stars. Deep inside its command center, Admiral Kira Holt stood before a curved wall of silent screens, each showing a different corner of the galaxy. She said nothing at first. She simply watched. Around her, officers in dark gray uniforms moved without rushing, their faces calm, their hands precise. There was no panic, no shouting, no alarms. That was the most human thing of all. When Earth prepared for crisis, it did so quietly. Behind Admiral Holt, a tall officer stepped forward and spoke. Confirmation received. Protocol Ember was activated by Ambassador Nolan herself. Full signal trace confirmed. The Admiral gave a small nod, as if she had expected nothing else. Then, with only a small breath, she said, "Initiate fallback measures. Begin second wave formation. Deploy silent assets." Those words moved through space faster than light, from corners of the galaxy thought empty, from mining rigs long abandoned, and from transport ships that were never really transports at all, came quiet answers. Cloaked vessels changed course. Listening posts activated dormant arrays. Earth's quiet watchers, small, unnoticed, and everywhere, began to move. But still, not a single shot was fired. Not a single message was sent to the Council. Earth wasn't going to complain. It wasn't going to argue. It was going to prepare. On the planet of Cytherin Vi, a Council research hub, human engineers had helped design the planet's cooling grid essential for the strange gas the planet mined from its surface storms. That grid stopped working 3 days after the Council's move against Earth. There were no explosions, no visible sabotage, just a silent system-wide reset. Emergency backups kicked in, but every time they activated, something would go wrong. Again, the researchers didn't know why. They blamed local interference, a glitch, old coding. But the truth was hidden deep inside the grid's design, a pattern written in the early days by Earth's own engineers, waiting quietly in case it was ever needed. Earth wasn't turning off the galaxy's lights. Not yet. It was dimming them just enough to be noticed. On Station Myraxis 9, one of the largest data routing centers for Council communications, a backup server activated unexpectedly. It should have done nothing, just hold old files. But instead, it began copying key traffic data, storing it, and sending silent pings into deep space. Council technicians noticed, paused it, and deleted the odd logs, thinking it was a misfire. They never realized that it wasn't a malfunction. It was a signal. Admiral Holt read the report herself. She studied every small thing, every loss of connection, every unexplainable shift in orbital beacons, every paused transport. She didn't celebrate them. She didn't even smile. She simply moved to the next screen, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about response. Back on Earth, beneath the old crust of what was once a forgotten military base hidden in Antarctica, a room lit up for the first time in 20 years. A table, long and curved, flickered with the names of every Earth-deep agent working across. Council space. Many had already gone quiet, either captured or hiding. But those still active were moving into new roles: code disruption, pattern interference, signal redirection. They were not fighters. They were engineers, linguists, diplomats, and programmers. But they had trained for this moment. The moment when silence was more powerful than shouting. The moment when absence would cause more panic than presence. Across the stars, a pattern began to emerge, one the Council couldn't ignore for long. Council ships found themselves being rerouted by navigation beacons that no longer obeyed. Defense satellites failed to recognize friendly codes. Agricultural stations experienced small, strange failures in climate control systems. Nothing deadly, nothing large. But every issue shared one thing: human-built components. And all of them stopped working. At first, Council leadership believed they could contain it. They called it technical fatigue or data decay. But behind closed doors, panic was growing. The Council had underestimated Earth's adaptability, Earth's reach, and most importantly, Earth's memory. The humans had watched quietly for years, seen the patterns, and prepared exits in every door they helped build. They didn't need an army to fight. They had left backdoors in systems, hidden tools in software, and signals in forgotten code. The Council had betrayed Earth in silence, and now Earth was answering the same way, not with destruction, but with absence. Earth didn't destroy the doors. It simply removed the keys. And far away, In a cold room beneath a starless sky, Admiral Holt stood once more before the darkened screens and said, "Let them feel the quiet. Only then will they understand who we are." The galaxy had grown used to patterned ships coming and going on schedule, systems running in perfect balance, and the Galactic Council always knowing what was happening in their space. But now, something had shifted. It began with whispers reports of strange shadows moving through the outer colonies, unexplained power shifts in long-range sensors, and sightings of vessels that didn't match any known registry. These weren't enemy warships, and they weren't pirates either. They didn't attack or send warnings. They simply passed through, silent and unbothered, often leaving nothing behind but confusion. On the surface, everything still looked normal. Council ships flew their routes, stations broadcast. The daily news and civilian travel continued. But for those watching closely, the signs were clear. Earth was moving, quietly, deliberately, and nobody could stop it. In the trading ports near the edge of Council space, old freighter crews began sharing stories in hushed tones. A miner from the Lochran Belt swore that he had seen a ship fly directly through a Council security grid without setting off a single alarm. Another merchant described passing a ship near a gravity well that didn't appear on any scanner, but cast a long shadow across the stars. Some laughed it off. Others grew nervous. But one fact remained. More and more systems were reporting ghost ships vessels that came and went like wind, leaving no digital trace. The Council Intelligence Corps tried to investigate, pulling security footage, cross-checking ship logs, and running diagnostics. But nothing made sense. In some cases, ships recorded by local sensors simply vanished in the playback. In others, camera systems recorded only empty space until, at the very last frame, the shadow of a hull flickered for a heartbeat, then disappeared. The Council began to realize they had a problem they couldn't understand, and it was growing. By the day, the fear wasn't in what Earth was doing. It was in how little they were doing, and how deeply it affected everything. Admiral Holt's strategy was working perfectly. Earth wasn't here to conquer. It wasn't here to destroy. It was here to remind the galaxy of something it had forgotten. Never mistake silence for weakness. The Council had made their decision. In the open, in a grand chamber beneath banners of peace. But Earth's answer was not given in speeches or battles. It was given in the slow, creeping sense that nothing was secure anymore, not codes, not routes, not even thought to be private. Transmissions. Even now, Council meetings were being recorded without any trace of hacking. During one closed-door session, as leaders debated how to respond, their internal screens all flickered at once. For a few seconds, the glowing crest of Earth appeared white and blue, with the simple symbol of the rising sun above a calm ocean. No message, no voice, just presence. Then it vanished. There had been no breach, no data trail, no signal source. Only Earth could have done it. Panic began to spread, but still only behind closed doors. The Council couldn't admit to its citizens that it had been outsmarted. Not yet. Instead, they focused on finding the source. They scanned every system, sent scout ships to places Earth had once visited, and tried to trace the pattern. But every move they made led nowhere. That's because the pattern wasn't in space, it was in the past. Every weakness now being exploited had been placed there years ago, quietly, when Earth helped build new systems, when it shared technology, when it offered upgrades. None of them were traps. They were simply options, silent switches waiting for a reason to flip, and the Council had given Earth that reason. Now, the switches were flipping one by one. On the cold moon of Sorali 3, a large Council outpost flickered offline for 28 minutes. No weapons were fired, no buildings damaged, but every system shut down. Lights, shields, climate control, communications all frozen. And just before power returned, every screen on the outpost showed the same short message: "We remember." After that, Earth's presence became known not through action, but through absence. Council ships would launch, but forget how to navigate certain routes. Secure channels would stop working in sectors where Earth once had research stations. Entire records of shared history began disappearing from the central archives, only the parts that involved human contribution. It was as if Earth's past was being carefully erased, not from memory, but from the system that tried to erase them first. Yet not a single life was harmed. Not one ship was lost. No planets were attacked. And that made the silence even louder. It was not revenge. It was demonstration. Earth was showing what power looked like when used with control, what influence meant when held with discipline. People across the galaxy, ordinary civilians, scientists, and students, began asking questions. Why is Earth being treated like this? What did they really do wrong? Why is the Council hiding things? Some began to investigate, digging through the old files before they vanished. They found Earth's early missions, how it helped stop the famine on Zethar, how it repaired the storm shields of Ventari Prime, how it helped rescue 3 entire species during the Kefir floods. These stories had once been celebrated. Now they were missing from official records, but people remembered. And that memory began to spread. Quietly, respect for humanity grew not from fear, but from realization. The Council had betrayed a friend, and now that friend was reminding them, not with fire, but with silence and shadow. On the dauntless horizon, Admiral Holt watched it all unfold from her darkened command deck. Around her, the stars looked peaceful, but she knew the galaxy was waking up. Earth's fleet had still not fired a single shot. It hadn't needed to, and still nothing was standing quite the same. On the 10th day after Earth's quiet disappearance, from Council records, the galaxy reached a tipping point. Systems continued to glitch. Long-established routes bent around invisible gravity fields that hadn't existed a week ago. Stations reported temporary losses of time moments where clocks stopped for no reason, only to restart minutes later, completely in sync. There were no explosions, no chaos in the streets, no public threats. But across the major species, from the towering Norix to the crystalline Tayari, the tension was growing heavier. The Council kept trying to appear in control. Press units reported minor anomalies and natural disruptions in older relay tech. Yet no one believed it. Not after the Third Medical World lost its AI assistance systems all at once. Not after every planetary database that once stored joint Earth Council medical research turned up blank. And especially not after the central broadcast system, the one responsible for translating Council law into hundreds of languages, reset itself and began reading a poem written by a human child over 100 years ago. No one could explain how it happened. The Council scrambled to cover it up, but it was too late. The event had been seen across 7 sectors. The words were strange, but oddly haunting. To those who call the stars their home, remember those who came alone. They learned, they gave, they stayed unseen until the sky no longer green. After that, even the most skeptical leaders knew something bigger was unfolding. So far, Earth hadn't spoken directly. Their ships had moved, their systems had responded, their presence had been felt, but not a single message had been sent. Not yet. Then, on the morning of the 11th day, every active Council screen across the galaxy turned black. From starships and learning centers to city domes and deep space mining rigs, every screen, every hollow panel, every beacon all, at once shifted to a single image. A calm sea under a rising sun, the ancient symbol of Earth. The silence lasted 6 seconds. Then a face appeared. Admiral Kira Holt, standing with perfect stillness on the command deck of the dauntless Horizon, her eyes steady, her voice calm, her uniform unarmed, and her hands behind her back. There was no echo, no background music, no translation delay. Her voice reached every world in perfect clarity. "We are not here for war," she began. "We have not attacked. We have not taken lives. We have only taken back what was ours." The image zoomed out slightly to show the human fleet behind her dozens of ships, shaped like nothing the galaxy had seen before. Smooth, quiet matte black. Vessels with no weapons visible, yet carrying an energy that even across a screen made people sit straighter. "We offered peace," she continued. "We shared what we learned. We contributed without demand. And in return, you betrayed us without warning, without discussion, without truth." She paused, not for drama, but because she knew the silence would be louder than any speech. "We do not wish to rule. We do not seek seats in chambers built on fear. But we will no longer allow decisions about our future to be made without you." S. Her tone didn't rise. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. The weight of her words was carried by every system failure, every erased file, every untraceable ship that had quietly passed through council space like a shadow through moonlight. "You asked what happens when Earth is pushed too far," she said. "This is the answer. Not fire, but frost. Not invasion, but absence. Not silence, but memory." The message ended there. No demands, no list of conditions, no threats. The screen faded back to the sea and the rising sun, and then everything returned to normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. For the first time in the Council's history, they had been addressed not by a petition or a debate, but by a demonstration of calm, unstoppable control. Across the galaxy, civilians talked quietly in their homes. Students shared clips of the message with translated captions. Historians pulled old human writings and tried to understand what Protocol Ember could possibly mean. Military leaders froze. If Earth had done all this without a single visible fleet in combat, what else could they do if pushed? But the most surprising reactions didn't come from the powerful. They came from the forgotten, the smaller species, who had never held real seats on the Council, the quiet colonies that had once been saved by Earth's ships, and the fringe traders who had always believed in humanity, even when others mocked them. Now they began to speak. Small messages, unsigned but shared, spread through the net. Earth stood by us. Maybe it's time we stood with them. In hidden corners of the stars, quiet alliances began to form, not through treaties, but through trust. Earth had not asked for loyalty. It had earned it, not with pressure, but with patience. And in the Council's great halls, filled with the galaxy's oldest powers, something strange happened. For the first time, silence fell not because Earth was being ignored, but because no one knew how to respond. Earth had spoken, and in doing so, it had left a message that echoed louder than any fleet ever could. The galaxy didn't end in fire. It ended in hesitation. For weeks after Admiral Halt's message, the Galactic Council remained silent, not because it had no voice, but because it had no words. The Grand Chamber on Meridian Gate, once the heart of interstellar diplomacy, echoed with empty speeches and unanswered questions. No one dared call a vote. No one dared suggest another false regulation. Instead, the silence stretched, growing heavier with each passing day, as if the very stars were holding their breath. And far beyond the reach of the Council's most advanced sensors, the dauntless horizon floated like a shadow against a cold blue star, silent, still, and waiting. Earth had spoken, and now it waited not for surrender, not for applause, for the truth to rise on its own. The effects of Earth's quiet resistance continued to ripple outward. On mining worlds, atmospheric controls began to return, but only those maintained by local engineers trained by Earth. Stations that once denied humans now opened their doors quietly, asking for help without words. In private, council representatives reached out not through official channels, but through old friendships, forgotten backdoors, and personal codes. Messages were simple. We understand now. Can we talk? Please return. But Earth didn't respond. It didn't need to, because something strange had happened. Across the outer colonies, local leaders who had once been afraid to speak against the council were now standing taller. The silence of Earth had given them a kind of courage, a quiet belief that dignity didn't require permission. On the twin moons of Sailor, a planet once overlooked by the council, a school began teaching Earth history again, not as a threat, but as an example. On the floating cities of Varn, people painted the image of the rising sun from Earth's message on there. Sails not as protest, but as hope. And in the old data vaults of the Eliari, the most secretive species in the galaxy, a sealed message was discovered, an invitation from Earth, sent many years ago, offering friendship, not alliance. It had been ignored then. But now it was studied with care. Finally, after 37 days of silence, the Council requested an emergency summit not at Meridian Gate, but on neutral ground, an ancient moon called Relin 4, once used for old ceasefire talks during past wars. The Council sent envoys. So did the fringe worlds. So did the quiet colonies. But no one knew if Earth would come. The meeting chamber was simple round, with no chairs, no flags, no weapons. Just a table and light. The council speaker stepped forward, ready to open the summit with formal words. But before he could speak, the lights dimmed slightly, and a single figure entered from the far end. It was not an army. It was not a warship. It was Ambassador Riva Nolan. She walked slowly, alone, unarmed, dressed in a plain dark coat with a single silver line on her sleeve, the symbol of the Ember Protocol. She didn't bow. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "You asked for a meeting." So I came. No one stopped her. No one interrupted. The speaker lowered his notes and stepped back. The room waited. Riva continued, her voice clear but calm. "We are not returning to ask for a seat. We are not here to bargain. Earth doesn't need to belong to this council to belong in this galaxy." She looked around the room not with anger, but with clarity. "You made your choice, and so did we. Now we meet not as student and teacher, not as applicant and judge, but as equals." One of the council envoys, a soft-spoken Tayari elder, finally asked, "And why are you here?" Riva paused, then smiled slightly. "Because the galaxy is changing, and if we don't change with it, we'll all be left behind." There were no debates that day, no votes, only listening. One by one, the representatives spoke not with demands, but with questions. Real questions. What had Earth seen that others had missed? How had it prepared for silence when others prepared for speeches? What did it want, truly? And Riva answered them all with patience. "We want peace, but peace with dignity. Cooperation, not control. Respect, not permission." Then she placed a small device on the table, a single thin crystal chip. "This is the Ember Treaty," she said. "It has no conditions. It is not a pact of submission. It is a reminder, a record of what happens when trust is broken, and what can still be saved when it is restored." The chip contained every system failure Earth had triggered and the code to reverse it, not as a threat, but as a gift. A quiet offering of peace from a people who had no reason to offer anything. The council accepted it. Not with celebration, not with banners, but with quiet nods and lowered heads. And so, the treaty was signed not to end a war, but to mark the end of ignorance. From that day forward, Earth stood apart, not above, not below, but beside. It no longer needed approval. It no longer asked to belong. It simply was. The Ember Fleet returned to silence, but never vanished. Earth ships were seen again in deep space, but they never stayed long. They came, they helped, and they moved on like a shadow that left behind light. And throughout the stars, from the cold moons to the golden clouds of Zor, people remembered the message that changed the galaxy. Not a threat, not a speech, just the quiet voice of a people who had been pushed aside, and who stood up not with fire, but with a whisper that left nothing standing.